Welcome to the Mystic Fool. I'm Martin Worth, and this is the Mystic Fool.
I had the pleasure just recently of sitting in the studio with David Bauer. David's a great friend of mine, and he and his wife Mamiko are the co-founders of an awesome healing modality called Lemurian Healing. And Lemurian Healing is a modality that originated from the goddess temples of Lemuria. So we sat and we chatted, and we intended to talk mainly about Lemuria, which we did. But we ended having an amazing rambling conversation around ascension, around collective consciousness, around time, and of course, around Lemuria. Enjoy. Cheers.
Yeah, I was enjoying our conversation about the pandemic. We were saying that maybe the pandemic might have been the beginning of that shift. The shift that we're talking about is the separation from old Earth to new Earth, which is played out in the approaches and the attitudes that people take towards the resonance of that particular time. So I'd be really interested in your point of view on that.
Yeah, and the splitting off of two Earths, two different
time tracks.
Well, I would call them levels of consciousness, that they're separated. For me, the new Earth, quote unquote new Earth, and the old Earth, the separation is more of a difference in consciousness than it is in timeline, because I think when you start talking about time, it just makes it a little bit more complicated.
True.
Because it's like, okay, how are you measuring time? What's the relationship with time? And we know from Einstein and all the relativity that time is just an illusion and depends totally on the observer, right?
Yeah, right.
So for me, the bifurcation of the old Earth, new Earth is more about a change in consciousness, where the separation means the frequency of conscious awareness gets wider and wider. That gap gets wider and wider.
Yeah.
And the pandemic might have triggered that event in not so subtle ways, but also it could have been creeping along and, been happening for many years, but
Totally.
the pandemic was just a really powerful inflection point.
A node point almost.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, now this separation has been gentle, and now it's moving into a new phase where the separation or the gap is now going to be getting wider and wider and accelerating. Yeah, and I think the polarization had been building for years, and it's kind of just like, okay, when you've got some embers in a fire and it's just smoking a little bit, but then you reach some kind of critical mass, not mass, but critical point of heat, and all of a sudden the log bursts into flame.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like the polarization was exacerbated or roared into a flame during the pandemic, but I don't think it started there. It was building for years in
of course.
social attitudes and politics and
and years even past that, possibly being millennia as well.
Yeah.
Because the cycle, we talk about cycles of time. Sorry to mention the T word again.
No. Time is important.
We talk about cycles of time, and we talk about like the precession of the equinoxes, 26,000 years, where we go for 11,000 years through. They say a time of darkness, but I don't like to call it that. It's like a time of perhaps normal evolution of Earth.
It's like this 11,000 years of normalness evolutionary experience.
And then there's 2,000 years where we come into, like, some people call it a photon belt. I think it's probably a photon belt of really high energy, and then we come out the other side for 11,000 years, and there's another at the other side there's another 2,000 year time of enlightenment, or time of ascension perhaps. And so I think it's, you know, we've been talking about the age of Aquarius. People have been talking about that since the 60s. And that's apparently when we moved into this age of Aquarius. Maybe those energies, off-planet energies, have something to do with precipitating this spiritual evolution. Yeah, because a lot of people were talking about polarization throughout the pandemic, which, from what you've just said, I just thought, oh, polarization. Because we are really talking about a polarization between those who would choose the way of love and light, and those who would choose the way of struggle,
and
fear,
and
a lot
doubt,
of fear and doubt and such, and resistance, I suppose, even is in the negative side.
Yeah.
So and people are talking about, you know, the polarization between the those who believed there was a pandemic and those who just let it ride over, or even, and then on the other side there's those people who really pushed against it, you know.
Yeah.
And also then there was the second wave of polarization, was when the vaccines came in, and how people are choosing one side or the other. And I wonder if those energies correlate, maybe not fully, because I can see it's an interwoven kind of energy, but that's the sort of that's the sort of energy choice that we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, however we label it, it seems that we get a dose of kind of new energy, new light that really accelerates conscious evolution during these 2,000 year periods. And sometimes when I try to picture it, it's like a creek or a river flowing downstream that sometimes when it's flat, it's kind of meandering. It's still moving forward, but it doesn't seem that dramatic. It doesn't seem like it's a swift moving stream. Obviously there's variation, but then all of a sudden you get a vertical drop, or, you know, it narrows, and all of a sudden it becomes whitewater rafting. Things move very fast, very turbulent. You can navigate it, but you have to be aware, right? So for me, these 2,000 year periods of special influx of light are kind of like, okay, energy's moving faster, evolution is happening quicker.
Yeah.
You know, things are speeding up, and you've got to hang on because it's going to be a ride.
Yeah, and it does seem that time does speed up in those moments.
Yeah, I feel like definitely.
Yeah. Well, in those moments.
Well, the illusion of time speeds up.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's right. Because, you know, it's interesting with time how when there's a strong emotional charge, whether it's positive or negative, when there's a strong emotional charge, time goes really fast, like a traffic accident. I taught first aid for years, and one of the big deals is that, you know, as soon as you notice the event, write down the time, because by the time you've got into helping that person as best you can, you'll have no idea how much time has gone past. You know, and it's similar when you're doing something you really love and really like, time flies, and then take strong emotion out of the equation. Sitting, waiting. I spend a fair bit of time on picket in the army.
Right.
Time drags under those circumstances. So it's we definitely create this. We create our own flow almost with time, don't we?
Definitely, and for me, it has to do with how much life force energy we're letting flow through us at any given moment. So it's not the emotion that calls it. The emotion is the indicator that you've opened the valve, and you are allowing, because we all have heard stories and we've maybe had experiences where you react and act in extraordinary ways when you want to. Like when you're not thinking about what's possible, what's not possible, what is someone going to think, you're not even there. You're just opening up and saying, I need to do this now, and you open up your conduit to let whatever you need, whatever energy you need, flow through you.
Yeah.
Like exactly. The mother who lifts the heavy automobile off.
Of the child.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
totally.
and the emotion lets you know that, you know, where you are in alignment. But most of the time when those things happen, I think it's just like someone is like cranking up the gas. Let more energy.
Yeah. There's a saying that I heard just recently that when desire arises, mental capacity increases. And I think it's along the same lines. And desire is not talking about anything necessarily sexual. It's about the desire to do something. Perhaps the inspiration to, like you get an idea to do something, like a podcast or something, release a course. And it's at that moment in time when the inspiration comes through to do something that the energy's there. And you say, oh, I'm busy right now.
Well, that's the thing, and it's a great example because I see this in my own life. Not that I'm not proud of it. I wish I was much better at this, but when you get the inspiration, that's just an indication. Like, okay, this is what life is supposed to be. You're supposed to focus on something that you desire and allow life force energy to flow through you, so you can experience that desire, whatever it is. Yeah. But so many of us are trained to enjoy that moment of inspiration. It's like, oh, what a great idea. And you get the next thought, and then you start thinking, oh, what if people don't like it? What if nobody downloads it? What if I get a bunch of negative
Yeah.
But we're kind of trained to cut off our own desire, whereas if you just stay with the pure inspiration, and some people are really good at that. They get the inspiration, and they don't think about, why is this not going to work? They're just thinking, oh, show me the next step to make this work. Where's the next step?
Yeah. Because there's that capability to stay in the energy of the inspiration, the desire, whatever it is, that actually is the energy of that thing that actually propels it and creates it in its purest form. Because when it's first conceived, that's its purest form,
And to add to that, you wouldn't even be able to conceive of it unless everything was all already lined up.
Yes.
It's the same thing. It's like you can't have a question without the answer simultaneously existing. You cannot label something as a problem unless the solution simultaneously exists. So the fact that, and just using the podcast example, the fact that you could even have the idea, oh, I'd like to do a podcast. So many things have had to line up for you to even have that thought and say, oh yeah, that would be something interesting to do.
Yeah.
So it already exists.
Yes.
It already exists. The essence of it already exists. But rather than go with it and go, yeah, this will be fun, so often we just go,
what about the technology?
Yeah.
What about the platform? What about this? What about that?
Yeah, and you start thinking of all the reasons why it's going to be difficult or not successful, and
There's a fellow who, I think it was Joe Vitale, who I was listening to one of his, probably a podcast, actually, and he said, have you ever noticed how you get an idea and you don't act on it? And then a couple of months later, you realise that someone else has actually already done it. And you think, damn. And he says, he reckons the universe gives the same inspiration to a dozen or so people because the universe knows that only one of them's going to act on it.
Well, and the thing is, and that's the neat, that's a neat thing about this collective consciousness is that an idea becomes available, right?
Yes.
A thought
Yes.
leads to a thought, and all of a sudden an idea becomes available, but that idea exists in the collective consciousness. So it's there for whoever. And I think it's funny sometimes where people argue or compete and say, well, I came up with the idea first, and it's like it's a very, very third-dimensional human view. It's like, no, it was out there. It was out there for anybody and everybody to access.
Yeah.
No one can really lay claim to it.
The universe is advertising. Listen up.
Yeah.
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 And that's true, and it's true for everything. You know, it's true for all things like that. By the time you've got the inspiration, then you've talked yourself out of it.
Somebody else is going to do it, so
it's going to have to run with it. Yeah. Wow, that got us away from the pandemic, didn't it?
but it's all related.
It sure is. Yeah.
And as I was mentioning to you earlier, I just really feel like, okay, if I was in non-physical and I was here kind of helping to guide the evolution of human consciousness, something like the pandemic is just brilliant in its simplicity, but also its pan-galactic effect on everything, on so many levels of human society, and so many, the majority of the human populace at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
That's a shift in collective consciousness.
Yeah, you couldn't script something as powerful and pervasive as a global pandemic.
That's right.
It's I'm not saying the pandemic was something we glorify or anything, but I just thinking in terms of human evolution, it's like, wow, brilliant.
Yeah. We do spend a lot of time, well, I don't know about yourself, but I have spent a lot of time looking at it, and in the initial stages of the pandemic from a very negative point of view, from the control point of view, and so on and so forth. And for me, that was what it dredged up in me. The fact I don't want to be controlled by the government, by the World Health Organization, or the New World Order. And I kind of slipped a little bit into some of the conspiracy theories around it at the time. Whether they're true or not, it's not the point. I slipped into that thinking. And it was when I realized that I slipped into that thinking and started to do something about it, that for me, that was an evolution for myself. And I know other people went through similar ones. A common evolution that I found with people was where they were completely isolated, and their own sense of self. A lot of people, well, I know quite a few people who came for healing sessions because they really didn't like being in their own company. Their social life had been stripped away, their work life had been stripped away. They're single and stuck in a house on their own and really had to come to terms with who they were themselves. And these things, it all sounds a little bit negative, but actually it's really good stuff.
And another reason why I say the whole pandemic from an evolutionary point of view was just brilliant in its simplicity, because it forced so many people across the planet to not just let the status quo continue ticking along, because so many of us had, I can't think of a better word, but we had issues, whether it's self-esteem, self-acceptance, deciding what's really important in our lives, where do we focus our time and energy. So a lot of things we've just kind of pushed off to the side for so many years. The pandemic said, no, here is your pressure cooker, here's your crucible of evolution, of personal evolution and healing.
Yeah.
We're going to force you to face these things and decide whether you want to evolve past them or devolve
into
and
them.
stay in the status quo.
Yeah, and that's the split, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. That's the polarization, the split. I know that for some people, including myself, once I decided that the coronavirus, had no part in my life, then it was like I was kind of in a different dimension, a different universe, because I kept working. Nothing really changed in my life, once I'd sort of stopped listening to Q and all those other things. Nothing was really affected in my life at all. I guess because I made a choice to just get on with things and not be bothered by the narrative, maybe.
And I think you're hitting on something that was essential to most of our experiences across the world, in our own personal evolution is that it became a choice point of conscious evolution, meaning, wait, this doesn't have to control me.
Mm.
There are gifts and benefits here.
Yep.
The sooner I recognize them, the sooner I become the observer, the easier my life will become.
Yeah.
Thank you, pandemic, for giving me this opportunity. Or you go in the opposite direction, and then you're rallying against, and you're resisting and complaining, and basically giving into the victim mentality, which is, I am not in control of my own reality. I'm at the mercy of the government, my neighbors, whatever, right? You give away your power, or you accept the fact that you are all powerful to create your own reality.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting what you say about people going to rallies and stuff. I just had the thought that realistically they're really still just asking the government for permission.
Yeah, well, that,
I want this to change, so I'm going to go and make the government change it, rather than just saying, hey, I'm going to walk on the path where it's changed and catch up everybody else.
Yeah, and there's the fallacy that well, most humans believe that they are not in control of their lives, that they feel they are the victim, that life happens to them, but from a more awakened point of view, you realize, no, I attract everything that I experience in my life. I'm the sole creator.
Absolutely.
I'm not the victim of my spouse, my neighbor, the government.
Yeah.
But that is a huge choice point. Do you give into the life happens to me, or do you embrace life happens for me?
Yeah. So obviously there's like a level of things happening, collective consciousness, if you want to call it that, which pretty much created the pandemic. Shall we just accept that as a...
Oh yeah, we all attracted it magnetically. Yeah.
And then within that magnetic attraction from the collective consciousness, perhaps a little bit of input from the universe to sort of push the evolution of the species along, perhaps. Within that, then the choice as to what you're going to attract out of that situation is a slightly different thing. So I'm sort of just seeing a little bit of difference between what humanity is going through as perhaps a stage, and then we choose what part we're going to play within that narrative.
And I don't feel a separation. It's just a difference of what we're going through individually.
Yeah.
Necessarily makes up the collective.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the gross sum of all of us doing this.
Yes. Yeah.
That makes up the
Yeah. And part of the reason why in December 21, when there was a lot of talk about an activation of an energy at Uluru in Australia, and it sounded a little bit fearful, but there was the thought that there had to be a certain mass of number of people within the collective consciousness who were resonating that energy to bring that through. Otherwise it wouldn't happen. Which I thought was interesting perspective. And so if we didn't get X number of 1,000 people resonating, then it was kind of like we'd missed the opportunity. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe that's like missing the opportunity of an inspiration to do a podcast, start a thing or something, but on a conscious collective level rather than just an individual level.
Yeah. But also just labeling something a missed opportunity or a failure is just a human perception.
It is definitely a human perception.
Human perception of that there are no mistakes, there are no failures, it's just experience, experience, and I do think there is a critical mass component to all of this. And just like in your own life, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like sometimes things don't change unless you've reached a critical mass of not letting things change. So,
Yes.
And then the traumatic event, the drama comes out because
Yeah.
you've reached that critical mass of
Yeah. And you've
resistance or
Yeah.
whatever it is, that, and finally it's like, oh, you get to release.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there is something to that, you know, where we reach a tipping point, and maybe the pandemic, maybe there's some tipping point opportunities within the pandemic,
I think so.
but I don't feel we're yet at the point where enough people have recognized their personal power,
Yeah.
and remembering that they create their own reality.
Yeah.
Because once we do reach that tipping point, it doesn't mean a majority of humans, but I think there is that tipping point number where
Yeah.
there is going to be a dramatic shift. And I think, you know, going back 2,000 years ago, I think Master Jesus came here with the intent to reach critical mass
Yes.
and create some major shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
Not a failure.
No.
Didn't happen, I think, the way he originally intended to.
No.
And because he didn't have the internet.
He didn't have
Right?
that. Yeah.
If Master Jesus had the
Yeah,
internet,
reaching a few people there in the middle of the desert kind of thing.
I think critical mass would have been,
Yeah.
but you need that critical mass in group consciousness for,
Yeah.
you know, the tipping point to give way to something huge and beautifully new.
Well, yeah, it occurs to me as I'm listening to what you're saying that imagine, you know, people say, on this date this is going to happen, you know. Imagine if that was, let's take that as true, that on, you know, the 31st of August 2023, the world's going to split into two harmonic pieces, and some people are going to just disappear off the planet and everyone else is going to be left with a mess. Whatever. That's one theory that I've heard. And if that was time dependent, wouldn't it be awful if it happened and you were the only one there? So, or there's a bunch of people that have ascended with you, and oh my God, I don't even like these.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is there has to be a critical mass.
There has to be.
It can't just be time.
And
Because God, inverted commas here, God would say, oh, I really didn't time that one right. So it's got to be about energy. It's got to be about critical mass.
Absolutely.
And it's got to be the evolution. I mean, as we know, and we could have a great rave about time. Yeah, we create time in this dimension so we can understand it, you know. So it's not about time, it's about energy, it's about critical mass.
Always,
Yeah.
whether we're talking about things on an individual scale or a global scale,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it is all about reaching that tipping point. And anytime I see someone say, on this date, this huge event's going to happen, it's like, part of
Yeah,
me
right.
feels bad for them because
Yeah.
they, you know, it's like this is in an arbitrary way we've determined how we're going to kind of measure the linearity of experience.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen on a specific date. It's, you know, it's going to be when we've reached critical mass.
Yeah. Yeah. When the energy is there for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, interesting. I like it.
not before, it's like the cake is done when the cake is done.
Yeah.
Even though the
Yeah.
recipe says put it in the oven for 40 minutes or whatever, it's like the cake is going to be done when the cake is done, not what the book says.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because there's so many variables.
Yeah. There's probably a certain kind of context within which the cake is created,
Yeah,
that the world is ascending, because we know Mother Earth has a soul, Mother Earth has spirit, Mother Earth is a living being, sentient being as well, and she's on her evolution too.
And we're all in this together.
Yeah,
Her evolution is our evolution.
absolutely. Yeah.
I feel that in our current human experience that we're on an ascension path.
Mm.
And whether I'm alive to experience it, you know, in physical form or not, I do believe that the current evolution and ultimate ascension of humanity is unique in that I believe this time is designed for humans in physical form to experience ascension while maintaining physical form,
Yeah.
which is kind of an oddity in creation. I mean, given all the evolution that's happened in the universe on multiple levels, it's kind of a unique thing, because usually, this is the way I picture it, it's usually like, I don't know, here in Australia, people go swimming in the pool, right? And sometimes it's like, okay, everyone out of the pool, take a break, we clean the pool, make sure everything's copacetic before everyone gets back in the pool.
Yeah.
Right? Or for those of you living in a colder climate, you might think about the ice skating rink, right? At some point, everyone has to get off the rink, let the Zamboni clear the ice off, lay down a new layer of ice, and it's like, okay, now you can skate again.
Yeah.
So for me, evolution has often been, okay, go have an experience, back to non-physical. Incarnate, have another experience, back to non-physical.
Yeah.
But when I talk a lot about Lemuria, and this is why my opinions tend to be in the minority and not so popular, so I always try to remind people that there's a view of Lemuria, and this is the one I hold, that Lemuria existed at a different dimension.
Mm-hmm.
We are much higher vibrating, higher dimension. The veils between our incarnate selves and higher selves or eternal selves were very thin compared to the veils we have now. We were telepathic. We experienced near instant manifestation because we knew our thoughts created our reality. And so the entire reality of Lemuria was so different. And I'm talking about not at the very beginning, but let's get to the end of the Lemurian experiment.
Yeah.
We were so connected, so high vibrating, so at one with the world around us that the end of Lemuria was something we felt and knew was coming. It wasn't some surprise. It wasn't some, but I understand third dimensional humans look at these things and try to put them in third dimensional terms and context. It's like, it was a cataclysm, that there was, was people talk about survivors of Lemuria. It's like, there was no surviving involved.
I don't think there was a cataclysm for Lemuria.
Yeah, but a lot of people do identify with that.
Yeah.
But I've come to understand that it's a confluence of different memories of, dimensional experiences or realities that happened maybe on Earth, maybe in other realities, but that word Lemuria, and for some people Atlantis, trigger those memories and those experiences. Yeah. But for me, the end of Lemuria was just, hey,
we're ready.
We've experienced and explored everything we can in this particular setup. It's like someone creates a stage play. There's sets, there's costumes, there's characters. You set it up and go, okay, now go experience the story. It's like, and then when the next production comes into the theater, you have to clear everything away, create a new scene, a new environment, new characters, new costumes, and say, okay, here, experience a different story. For me, that's been happening forever on this planet. And Lemuria was one example of this, but it happened at a much higher frequency. So,
100%,
I totally feel that there were other dimensional experiences happening on Earth at the same time as Lemuria. Not everybody. Beings could have been concurrently living in the same, quote, geographic location as Lemuria. But they weren't aware of it because they might have been in a third density and Lemurians were in a fifth density, and just it's like angels. We're sitting in your in your studio space, which is very lovely, and we are not alone.
No.
There are some angels in this room with us. There are some spirit guides who have just been sitting around, kind of like
enjoying the art.
Exactly, and beaming. There's some nature sprites here surrounding your studio that I know. So I can't physically see them. But they're here.
Exactly.
And the same thing is like Lemuria existed in that kind of higher realm that if you were third dimension, you probably wouldn't have access to even seeing it. And getting back just quickly back to the point about ascension, because we are aware that Lemuria was coming to an end, it wasn't a panic. Yes, there was that feeling of loss. However we could experience that, like in a fifth dimensional reality of quote sadness at loss, but not it's not the same as, much more subtle than we experience
Yeah.
those emotions here. But anytime that something goes away, something you feel so close to and attached to, there's naturally some kind of feeling of loss or separation, or maybe nostalgia. Maybe that's
Nostalgia is a good
a
word.
better word.
Yeah.
But we weren't
Yeah.
scared, we weren't sad, it wasn't a surprise, we all knew it was coming, and that's where all of us were able to make a choice. Do I just leave the physical reality and return completely to non-physical, or do I stay here and travel to another part of the earth plane with everything I've experienced and become a seed for that, or a record keeper, or an emissary for that vibration, and taking it off to another part of the world. So some people in Lemuria made that conscious choice to be emissaries, seed planters, rather than returning to non-physical. So for me, that was the choice rather than ascension. When I think about ascension, I think about the people who actually built Machu Picchu, not the Incas, the people who predated the Incas, or the people who built the pyramids, not the Egyptians.
Yeah,
the people who
exactly.
built Chaco Canyon in New Mexico.
Not the Mexicans.
Yeah, they got to a certain level of group consciousness where that small group of people literally ascended.
Yeah. Reached
like-
that ascension frequency of
And reached that
collective
tipping point.
consciousness, and the tipping point we were speaking of earlier, and in the twinkling of an eye. Yeah.
But when I
And
think
that's where you have these ruins left in the middle of the jungle, and you think, where'd all the people go?
exactly, there's no evidence of
Yeah.
Physical death, and
So one level of ascension is physical death.
yes,
And that's a natural cycle of how we, as a spiritual being, experience this world on different levels, perhaps starting off banging a few rocks together eons ago, and now we're sitting in a fabricated studio with a microphone and an iPhone. So, but so that's, the number of past lives that we've had, each time learning a little more about love, joy, and that you don't have to bang rocks together to get your own way, so to speak. I'm being loose worded here. So there's certainly an ascension each lifetime. But the ascension we're really talking about is like more of a collective consciousness.
yeah, that's interesting, because I had not thought about the illusion of human death that we experience as an ascension, because it's making me think that the ascension process is actually when we're in physical form.
Yeah.
But when we leave this physical
Yeah.
realm, we're just returning to our natural state
Yeah.
to relish and enjoy everything we experienced.
Yeah.
But human physical death, for me, each one is not an ascension. I think of ascension of these communities that reached the level of group consciousness that said, hey, we can do this. We can leave physical form together consciously.
Yeah.
Most humans aren't consciously choosing their death and aware of not doing it.
Maybe. Yeah.
But that's an interesting idea. When we do leave the physical form, that's when we get to become aware of everything we just experienced under the veils
Yeah.
that we're not aware of, and we look back and go, oh my goodness, I can't believe, that's so funny, I was so concerned about X, Y, and Z, when X, Y, and Z have just nothing to do with anything. They're so not important, and I
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of ascension, I like that idea that we assimilate all that we've experienced and get to appreciate it.
Yeah.
But for me, that's our natural, normal state. This is just a temporary.
Yeah. This is an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. as you say, it's a vacation.
Yeah, and we do it for the experience, and we do it for the fun of it.
Yeah. That's something I was thinking about yesterday and the day before. Is we come into this life. Okay, so which is not really me, but the me that is my essential nature, whatever that might be. Because I think that's a really long subject. Our essential nature comes in, born as Martin, born as David, and here we are to experience this time, and I'm air quoting the T word, this time, these parents, these circumstances. Also this time, this ancestral line, and this perhaps is more apt in these circumstances. And whether there's a reason for this particular choice or not, we're here to make the best of it.
Oh, but it is a very conscious choice. It is not, for me,
not random.
Not random, and this is something that I had heard many years ago, that from non-physical's point of view, coming into a human body is like a death experience. And re-emerging into non-physical is what
it's like a birth.
It's like a birth because
we got it the wrong way around. You're saying?
Yeah, because we choose. It's like, okay, temporarily I'm going to focus a bit of my light into this dense body in this dense environment. But for me, all of it is a very meticulous, conscious choice.
Oh yeah.
That the when, the where, to whom, in what situation, what DNA am I getting myself into? All of that is just, and you have some friends or guides or teachers or whatever you want to label them as, helping you create like this. This is going to be fun. You're like the director or a producer of a movie who's getting all the elements together. It's like, okay, we've got all the people we need. We've got people lined up. We've got the circumstances, the timing. We begin shooting on this day.
Yeah.
And it's all done to create. So it's like, okay, have fun, create your movie.
Yeah. That's good. And that's like one life experience of many life experiences that our essential nature has shared.
And are all happening concurrently in the now.
Exactly, yeah. I sometimes explain it to people, like, you've got all these shoes in your cupboard, right? And if you're higher self, let's say that essential, we'll just call it higher self to give us a term.
Right.
I think that's a good term to use, isn't it? Higher self goes to the cupboard, opens the cupboard, and there's all these shoes. All these shoes have soles, all these soles in the cupboard. And there's, I remember when I went hiking. I remember when I used to jog, and there's my joggers. And I remember, there's my Doc Martens. I used to wear those when I went out. And so there's all these, you can only wear one pair of shoes at a time, if time is time. If time is time. But when you look at all those shoes, all those different experiences that you've walked, you see them all at once. They're contemporaneous.
Yep, they're all.
And all those memories contemporaneous, and I think that's probably a very awkward way, but a way of seeing how higher self sees all of our past lives and our future lives.
Yeah, because what we consider to be future, but are all
because they're all simultaneous,
concurrent.
Yeah, that's why I think, like yourself and myself, obviously, who resonate with Lemuria. Is it possible, or do you think that that's the mechanism, that we have had a future life, a future from this perspective in Lemuria? Because we're certainly not as ascended as we were when we were in Lemuria. So have we had a future life there, which is contemporaneous on our time track as higher self, and we are here with that knowledge to, part of our blueprint, as you say, there's a reason for being here, to share that knowledge to help in the ascension of mankind.
That is very possible and not outside the realm of possibilities because, but again, this is about the human perspective.
Absolutely.
And
try to explain things
in a non-linear.
Yeah.
but because it's happening concurrently, it's accessible to us now as much as our higher selves will allow that.
How thick's your veil?
Yeah, how how connected. Because any of those things that we can connect to,
yeah,
we're only allowed to connect to, not allowed. We can only
allow ourselves.
Yeah, to connect with things that provide us some benefit in
this life,
in this current time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, current incarnation.
And I've over the years talked to clients who said, "But I want to connect with this past life, and I want to find out here." And it's like, okay, well, for whatever reason, your higher self is not letting me access that.
Yeah, you don't need that right now.
Yeah, so you can try on your own, but I'm saying you're asking me to do something, I'm connecting and I'm realizing like there's nothing here that I can share with you because your higher self is like the gatekeeper to any of that, and I can't I can't go around or go above your higher self to try to get through the back door because it's just not the way it works. But we only have access to things that are concurrent. But Lemuria could be a future experience. But you raised a really interesting point too about we're not as ascended or not as high vibrating now as we were in Lemuria.
Yeah.
But again, since it's all just experience, sometimes you want to go do something that's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
It's because you have more experience, are wiser, you are, for lack of a better term, an older soul with more wisdom and knowledge. And it's like, that's going to be a challenge.
I'm going to have another crack at that one.
Yeah. But I'm going to go do this dense human lifetime in physical form because they're going through this huge mass consciousness evolution, and I want to be physical for that. And I know I can contribute. And I want to be a part of that.
And so, I might want to experience it.
Exactly. Because
I want to go through a pandemic. I've never done one before.
I've come across other soul families, with clients. But for my soul family, I'm the only one that's physical on Earth right now because I'm the one having the physical experience for the benefit of my own soul family collective. Yeah, doesn't have to be. We don't all have to be here. It's like here I'm doing it. I said I'm gonna go physical this time.
Yeah, it's my turn.
Right, but it doesn't mean it has a linear progression of like, okay, now you've achieved this and you've reached your certification. Now you're allowed to do the next level.
Yeah, it's not grades. It's not an allowance. It's all about choice, isn't it?
It's always about choice, and it's all about the experience.
Yeah, you could choose to come into this incarnation in this time with about as much knowledge of things spiritually, and I know it's a dangerous thing to say, as a very non-evolved human being, and have a very weird and interesting existence. Or you could choose to have a few more runs at things to get your skills up. I mean, we know it's not all linear. I mean, I like what you say. But it's something you said, though, was when we were in Lemuria, and I know that's okay, because that's how we say it, but how about when we're going to be in Lemuria as well? There's another draw, isn't it? Because it's all contemporaneous. Yeah. And perhaps Lemuria is on a timeline of, like perhaps a string of lights on a party lights, and there's these past lives in. Perhaps if they're assembled in any sort of order, they're assembled in level of spiritual consciousness frequency, from being a very dull red down this end to a bright, beautiful sort of violet at the other end. I'm being very 3D about this. But somewhere in the middle, here we are. We're kind of like a greeny orange heart colour almost here. And we're as brilliant indigo violet ascended Lemurian frequency up here, you know. So, but they're all on the same voltage line.
I think I like that image, and just adding to that, I think if you imagine it as a spiral,
Yes.
and that you have access up and down, not only in terms of level, but also, I mean, you can draw a line between any 2 points in the spiral and feel a connection. Interesting. One of my mentors, this is going back 30 years ago, one of my mentors was explaining the current process of human evolution, human consciousness, and talking about the apex of that being the shift, right? Where we reach critical mass, we reach the tipping point, and there's this dramatic ascension event. And he was explaining to me, he said, the shift has already happened. We just have a vague memory of it. So here we are experiencing, knowing that it already happened.
Yeah.
But we're here experiencing. But there's a version of ourselves who are there at that tipping point or post tipping point experiencing it.
Yeah. Totally resonating with it.
Yeah. So Lemuria could be past, present, or future.
Yeah, because none of those actually exist.
Right. So it's just other.
Yeah.
And we have access to it if we want.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
fun stuff to think about.
Absolutely fun. That was the word that was coming to my mind.
And it's kind of liberating when you let go of linear time and, you know, past life, future life, and just say, okay, this is all me, this is all us at the same time.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit more, it takes the pressure off. Like, I have to get it right. It's like, no, you're here.
I love that, yeah.
You're here. Enjoy it as best as you can.
Yeah.
Because and for me, and I'm still learning this day by day, that the fundamental choice is, are you consciously enjoying this by choosing thoughts that make this enjoyable, or are you allowing yourself to just be miserable and unhappy and wake up with that feeling of dread? And we were talking about
we were talking about
last night. Just you know, it's like, it's a choice. Are you going to find a way to make this fun and interesting, or are you going to complain and drag your feet through the whole thing and go, that wasn't very satisfying.
Yeah, gee, I really messed that up by creating all that negativity. Yeah, that's it. Like, we come zooming down to this planet, landing in a
splat.
Yeah, a couple of cells, maybe. I don't know at what stage. Different cultures have different view of when spirit lands into the body. It doesn't really matter. You land into the body, and from that moment forward, you start making assumptions about the world. And I guess you have to, because you got to know how to navigate this third dimension when you've just been in this beautiful everything at once dimension of connected to all things through all time and space. I feel like we just ended up being done, didn't we?
It just felt like
it just went, you're done now, guys, come on. That's enough. Thank you so much, David.
Definitely fun and satisfying.